Good evening and welcome to C-SPAN's coverage of Election Night 2000. It's 8 p.m. Eastern and the polls are now closed in 22 states and the District of Columbia, including a number of the 14 so-called toss-up states, which will hold the answer to who will be our 43rd president. In St. Louis, a judge has extended voting hours because of heavy voter turnout there. Also at stake tonight, all 435 seats in the House of Representatives, with only about 35 of those competitive, and 1/3 of the U.S. Senate, with closely watched races in Virginia, New York, Delaware, Minnesota, and Missouri. 11 states are also selecting their governors today. Our role on C-SPAN tonight is not numbers. There are many news stations you can turn to for the returns, but the events. We're partnering with 10 local television stations across the country to watch victory and concession speeches in some of those key congressional races. We also have cameras in Austin, Texas. You're looking at a live picture from there right now, where Governor Bush will address supporters later tonight. We'll be keeping a close eye on Nashville, where supporters of Vice President Al Gore have gathered around the War Memorial. This is the same place where he announced the selection of Joe Lieberman as his running mate. Another person you'll be hearing from on our network tonight is Green Party nominee Ralph Nader. He will greet his supporters at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And Pat Buchanan, the Reform Party nominee, will close his campaign at a hotel in Arlington, Virginia. All the while tonight, we'll have our phone lines open, as we do here on C-SPAN, so we can hear your analysis of today's election events. I'd like to give you the phone numbers now, and we'll have them on the screen throughout the evening. Republicans should use 202-624-1111. Democrats, 202-624-1115. And Independents, 202-737-6734. But we'd also like to invite people watching outside the United States, including people watching in Great Britain by the VVC Parliament channel, to use that number, 202-737-6734. We are going to be checking in throughout the night on those House and Senate seats with the reporters over at Congressional Quarterly. Let me begin by introducing you to Bob Benenson, who covers politics for CQ, for an overview on the races in the United States Senate. Bob, tell us a little bit about how to watch the returns tonight.
Well, obviously there are some very key races early in the evening. We've already had a 1-1 turnover with the Republicans picking up 1 seat in the Senate and the Democrats picking up 1 seat. The Democrats won the Florida seat that had been held by Republican Connie Mack. Bill Nelson, a moderate Democrat who used to serve in the House of Representatives and is the current state insurance commissioner, will be the new senator from Florida. He'll join Bob Graham, whose moderate Democrat profile Bill Nelson tried to follow along in this year's campaign. In Virginia, as everybody in Washington, D.C. area knows, there was a fierce race between George Allen, the former governor, and the incumbent Democratic Senator Chuck Robb, and George Allen has been declared the winner. We're now in a phase where there have been poll closings in several other key states. Some of the races to watch there include Michigan, where Spencer Abraham is trying to stave off a very determined challenge by U.S. House of Representatives member Debbie Stabenow, a Democrat. And that race looks like it's going to be too close to call. The Democrats need to make a net gain of at least 4 seats in order to gain parity in the Senate. That would get them to 50-50. But they would need to win the White House and have the vice president be the president of the Senate to give them an operative majority there if they were to break even at 50-50. So in reality, to be assured of majority control of the Senate in the 107th Congress, the Democrats need to win a net gain of 5 seats. They have become competitive down the stretch in a number of key races. Minnesota, where Rod Grams is probably the most vulnerable Republican incumbent, as I mentioned, Spencer Abraham in Michigan, Slade Gorton in Washington, and of course the now famous Missouri race in which John Ashcroft, the Republican incumbent, is trying to defeat Mel Carnahan, the former governor of Missouri, who was his challenger in this Battle of the Titans race. Mel Carnahan was killed in a plane crash a month ago, and yet there's been this huge outpouring of sympathy for him, which may result in his election over John Ashcroft, the Republican incumbent, which would ensue, what would ensue in that case is that the interim Democratic governor would appoint Jean Carnahan, Mel Carnahan's widow, to succeed him. So this is an unprecedented event.
Well, Bob Benenson, explain what the political implications are of that judge's decision to extend the voting hours.
Well, apparently turnout has just been fantastic in Missouri.
Does that benefit one side or the other?
It's hard to say. There's sometimes a general presumption that the Democrats, because they have more registrants in many states still, even though there's been a Republican trend in a lot of places over the last few years, that high turnout benefits the Democrats. It's hard to say in this case. Both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, spent millions to mobilize their voters. The Democrats to get people out to vote for Mel Carnahan and to really energize the sympathy vote, and the Republicans to try and save the seat for John Ashcroft. So it's a little hard to say. In St. Louis County, that's a mixed suburban county. There's some Democratic areas, some Republican areas, so it's hard to say how that's going to break.
Well, we'll be back to you throughout the night. Thanks for the overview on how to watch Senate returns. And with two races now called, the Senate stays as it is so far, 54-46 for the Republicans. Bob Benenson, thanks again. We're going to begin with telephone calls and hear your reaction to what you saw at the polls today and what you're hearing from the news stations in your part of the country. First call is from Hanover, Pennsylvania. Republican, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to know how Governor or Vice President Bush Gore stands as far as the gun issues. What I understand is he wants a living, breathing Constitution, which is going to take most of our rights away from us, and I'd like to know how you feel about that.
Well, let me ask you a question. I heard a statistic tonight that Pennsylvania has the highest per capita gun registrations in the United States. How important was this one issue for you in going to the polls today?
This one issue was very important to me. I am a very high gun advocate, and I respect my gun laws. I do what I'm supposed to do. I'm a normal person. I've never been in trouble, and I just want to know how this stands as far as the democratic system.
Okay, thank you for your call. And we'll let comments stand tonight. We are here not to answer questions, but to listen to your comments and analysis of what's been happening. San Antonio, Texas, next, a Democrat. Good evening. Go ahead with your comment.
Hello?
You're on the air.
Okay. I had a question about as far as how does Governor Bush stand on the Social Security, and how does he want to preserve that? I have a grandmother living off about $500 a month, and how are the elderly going to live off of such a low income?
Well, the time for analysis of issues seems beyond us. Who did you vote for today?
Excuse me?
Who did you vote for?
I voted for Al Gore.
And why did you make that decision? How important was Social Security?
Mainly, I read a book called The Fortunate Son. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. It's written by J.H. Hatfield. It describes more about how George Bush stands on Social Security and things that he's done in his past. I don't very wealthy area, and I do see a lot of my neighbors and as far as relatives living in a low income, and I wanted to, and that's what's really, I guess you could say, putting me to vote for Al Gore, because he wants more tax cuts as far as like for education and for the working family.
Well, thanks for your call. San Antonio, Texas. Arcadia, Missouri on our Republican line. Welcome to the program. Sounds like you have quite a contest going on there.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I'm very angry over the polls staying open past 7 o'clock this evening.
Why does that make you angry?
I feel like that it's really tricky. It's just not right. I've never heard of this before, and it just isn't right.
Well, explain why you think it's not right.
Because we've always closed at 7 o'clock, and why should one place stay open past 7 when others are closing at 7?
How many polling places are affected by the judge's decision, do you know?
Right now I know St. Louis. I'm not sure what else. I just got in, and I haven't been listening to it all. I haven't had time.
Do you think it favors one party versus the other?
Yes, I do.
And explain why.
Because I think that St. Louis is probably has more Democrats.
And so you think this gives an unfair advantage to both the presidential and the Senate race?
Yes, I do, and I think it was planned that way.
Okay. Thank you for participating this evening. Next is Indianapolis on the air and on our Democrats line. Welcome to the program. Your comment about Election 2000.
I'm calling because I am really concerned about George Bush getting into the White House. The reason why I'm concerned is because his use of alcohol from the time he was 20 years old to the time he was 40, and the percentage of alcohol that he had in his body at the time he did the DWI was a high percentage. And I just think a person who's had an alcoholic problem does not need to be in the White House because he could be sneaking bottles in and drinking at inappropriate times. It shows me his stress level, and I don't believe he can tolerate very much stress, and I believe he will turn to alcohol, or perhaps his father will be running the White House.
Okay, Indianapolis, thanks for your comments. Steve Scully is going to be on the internet this evening looking at a number of the voter sites to tell us what they're reporting about the election tonight. Where do you want to begin?
Susan, let's start about talking about our website, cspan.org. We will have the Associated Press real-time results for the presidential, the Senate, the House, and the gubernatorial races. You can also watch, if you have the real video capacity, the scenes at the Buchanan headquarters, down in Austin at Bush Cheney headquarters, in Nashville at the Gore headquarters, and here in Washington at Nader headquarters at the National Press Club. Again, as Bob Benenson said, there are 34 Senate seats up for grabs. There are 19 Republican-held seats and 15 Democratic-held seats. This is from CNN.com. All Politics. We'll go down the list and show you some of the winners in case you missed them earlier in the evening. First of all, in Connecticut, Senator Joe Lieberman, who was running for re-election while simultaneously seeking the vice presidential nomination with Al Gore. He defeated Phil Giordano in Connecticut. Also in Delaware, a pickup for the Democrats. Governor Tom Carper, who is defeating Bill Roth, the longtime senator from Delaware. In Florida, another Democratic pickup in the retiring seat of Connie Mack. Bill Nelson defeating Bill McCollum in that seat in Florida. In Georgia, Zell Miller defeating Mac Mattingly. Of course, Zell Miller, who was appointed following the death of a Republican senator, Paul Coverdell, in Georgia. Moving on to Indiana, the polls in that state closing at 6 o'clock this evening. Senator Lugar seeking re-election and easily defeating his opponent. In Maine, Olympia Snowe, also a Republican, winning re-election. In Maryland, longtime Senate Democrat Paul Sarbanes winning re-election in Maryland. In Massachusetts, Senator Kennedy, who's been in the U.S. Senate since 1962, again an easy re-election for him. Moving down to Mississippi, Trent Lott winning re-election in Mississippi. And then as we move further down to Ohio, Mike DeWine, who was the incumbent Republican in Ohio, he won re-election. In Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum defeating Congressman Ron Klink. In Tennessee, Bill Frist, who won re-election. In Texas, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison. In Vermont, Senator Jim Jeffords. And the surprise of the night so far, former Governor George Allen defeating Senator Chuck Robb. That is a Republican pickup in Virginia. And then finally in West Virginia, Senator Byrd, longtime Democrat from West Virginia, again maintaining his seat in that state. That again from CNN.com.
Thanks very much. Let's go back to phone calls. Jacksonville, Florida, Republican caller.
Yes, I was just curious. I'm watching news feeds via the computer and on television and things like that. In Florida, 20 minutes after the polls closed, with only 1% being reported, they've already given the state to Gore, and I'm just flabbergasted by the whole system.
You don't rely on those exit poll numbers?
Well, yeah, I mean, CBS did it, ABC. I don't know if I should mention those things.
Sure.
And then the fact that we've got swing states out in the West that via absentee ballots, things like that, we're not going to know the results of that. I mean, how can we rely on information given us to the media or given to us by the media?
Let me ask you a question. If these polling numbers are correct and he has in fact carried the state, what would you credit that to?
You know, I don't know, but you know, his brother is the governor here, and I've lived here most of my life. And everybody that I've talked to, I've heard straw polls and things like that over the radio, and none of them official, of course, but everybody said that they were voting for Bush. I would probably have to say, and I hate to say this, but liberal bent of the media, perhaps, or of the major media at least, and quite frankly, I'm considering relocating.
Thanks for your call. Bob Dubell is on the line with us, executive editor of USA Today, a newspaper which prides itself both on its national scope and its reporting of numbers and statistics. What is your particular challenge on a night like tonight?
The particular challenge is to call the race correctly.
What time
I
is
think
your
that the polls show that it's been a cliffhanger, and there are early returns in, but we want to make sure that we have the best available information before we make a call on who ultimately winds up at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
What time do your first presses roll?
First presses tonight will roll at 11:20 p.m.
And if you do not know the outcome at 11:20 p.m., what do you expect that headline to read?
There are various things we're kicking around. We may focus on some of the state races, some of the, if winners have been declared, we may say it's too close to call. We may focus on some exit poll reaction and demographics and voting patterns, etc., gender breakdown, male, female, etc.
There's no one, I guess, in your business who doesn't remember the famous photographs of Dewey defeating Truman. That's on your mind tonight.
Absolutely correct. I think that that's one of the concerns you have as a print medium in terms of the internet, or even in the electronic world. You could correct the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the next hour, but for the print medium, you're out there for posterity, and that's the record you will live by, as the Chicago newspaper found in that election.
How many editions will USA Today roll on tonight's results?
Maybe 4 or 5. It depends on how the vote is going when we make the call. Certainly, the House and Senate will be up for grabs, and we will be able to update and replate pages until about 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time.
And would you tell people what they will be able to find in your newspaper tomorrow? How extensive will your reporting be?
It will be very extensive. We will have state-by-state tables, everything you want to know about the election, from the White House to the House to the Senate to key state races, even to including local referenda, including some sports results regarding the naming of stadiums and so forth.
Of course, all this job made a little bit easier by the fact that the Internet's much more sophisticated than even 4 years ago. So your colleagues on the website will be updating numbers throughout the night.
They are, and one of the interesting features on the website is that they will allow viewers or users to find out the presidential results in their counties. For example, if you have somebody on the West Coast who wants to know something about Hudson County, New Jersey, for example, you call there's a way to get the county returns by county.
And how are you doing that? Do you know?
It's getting raw data from the Associated Press, updated election files. They're being updated every 6-7 minutes or so, and then with software converting that into a breakdown by counties.
And how long will that be on there?
It'll be updated throughout the evening.
And we'll be there for a few weeks, perhaps, so people who are really interested in going back and looking at these numbers can spend some time with them?
Again, it will be updated, and we'll have the latest numbers. I mean, when absentee ballots roll in, and some states will not be counting absentee ballots until several days after the election, those will be updated, too.
Well, thank you. Good luck deploying all those troops and getting those editions out.
God bless you, and thanks for calling. This is a great night to be a journalist.
We appreciate your time. Bob Dubell is executive editor at USA Today, with a big challenge in a national newspaper and a newspaper that is full of statistics about tomorrow's election. Let's take another telephone call. It is from Austin, Texas. Austin, go ahead on our Democrats line. Good night. What is it like in the state capitol there tonight?
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, gosh, I'm not at the state capitol, but I'm sure there are tons of people out there, because when I went to the voters line, the line was packed. I mean, there was just so many people. But
now, you voted for Al Gore.
Yes.
And why did you make that decision?
Well, I heard their last debate, and when I was actually sitting there listening to them, it seemed as if my family is all in front of the TV. It seemed as if Bush didn't answer the questions appropriately. every question that he was asked, it seemed as if he was dodging the questions, and that made my decision. But I was actually leaning towards him when I was listening to that debate prior to it, and it seemed as if he was dodging questions. Like, instead of answering it, he was just saying, "Oh, well, can we just move on to the next subject?" And he kept dodging every question that Al Gore would put to him. So it just seemed as if he wasn't, either he was trying to hide something, or I mean, I'm not sure, but he just gave me a bad impression.
Thanks for your call. Kauai, Hawaii is next on our Republican line. What do you have to say for the audience?
Hi, I was just calling in kind of a response to someone who was talking about George Bush's alcohol problem. And just because he's one of the few politicians that have admitted he's had a problem, I don't feel he should be judged by that, and he's not the first politician that's drank a little too much or partied too much. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Republic, Ohio, Democrat, you're on the air. Welcome.
Hi. I voted for Gore this year because I believe you need to keep the checks and balances as you did when you had Reagan with a Democratic Congress.
So you specifically thought that the House and Senate would stay in Republican hands and wanted another point of view at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue?
Correct. I think that'll stay the way it is.
Okay. Thanks for your call. Appreciate it. Next call is from Burnsville, Mississippi. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Good evening. How are you doing?
Thanks for your call.
Thank you for taking it. I just got a quick comment regarding the remark that was made about the possibility of Governor Bush slipping in a bottle into the White House, maybe to relieve stress or for whatever reason he could. There's other things to do, possibly even find a cigar. Thank you.
Thanks for your call. A number of states have already been called by the networks for one candidate or the other in the presidential race. Let me run through them real quickly. On Governor Bush's column, Kentucky, South Carolina, Indiana, Virginia, Georgia, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Texas. And right now we're going to take you to WPVI in Philadelphia. Pennsylvania, one of the key states people have been watching.
Numbers in the presidential race in Pennsylvania, we can show them to you. Just 1% of the vote counted. Al Gore leading George Bush by those figures. Pennsylvania, the only state of the big three that has yet to be called, and in fact, ABC News says Pennsylvania is still too close to call. But let's look at our presidential map here. And the big story since we last spoke to you, ABC News has given the state of Michigan to Al Gore. Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan have been called the big three. So far, Gore has both Florida and Michigan. Pennsylvania still too close to call. That is the breakdown. Other states that have gone to Gore since we last spoke to you, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, Connecticut, and Washington, D.C. For Bush, Mississippi, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Kansas, and North Carolina. No surprises there. But let's call in David Henry, who is at Bush, Pennsylvania headquarters in Harrisburg. And David, so far the battleground states are breaking for Al Gore.
So far, Jim, and as you can imagine, that leaves a lot of pressure on the Republican Party here in Pennsylvania. I mean, they have got to deliver this state if they want George Bush to become president. Now, they have worked out a scenario where he can win with 275 electoral votes, but Pennsylvania remains key. So the pressure is on, and they still think that it's too close to call and they can actually win Pennsylvania. I have with me Leslie Gromas, who is the Bush campaign coordinator for the Mid-Atlantic states. Leslie, what is your strategy in Pennsylvania concerning the T, up the middle and across the top of the state? You think that the big turnout there can still deliver this state for George Bush?
Yes, I do. In the past few years, the T, Central Pennsylvania, have turned out enormously for the Republican candidates, and that's what we're counting on again, as well as the southeast suburbs down outside of Philadelphia. I mean, it's a critical area. We feel confident. We feel cautiously optimistic, but we need a lot of those areas, including those ones in southwestern Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania, to come through.
And you feel you were getting the voter turnout you needed?
Well, we just know the voter turnout statewide has been huge, but we know it's been very, very large in the areas that we need it.
Okay, Leslie Gromas of the Bush campaign, still cautiously optimistic, still keeping their fingers crossed, and the pressure is on for Pennsylvania. I'm David Henry, Channel 6 Action News. Jim?
Thank you, David. And Vernon Odom is at Gore headquarters in Philadelphia, his Pennsylvania headquarters. Vern, what's the reaction there?
Jim, there's been exhilaration here at Gore headquarters in Center City after the announcement that Florida was going to the vice president, apparently, and Michigan as well. I'm with Dan Fee, the communications director for Gore 2000 in Pennsylvania. Are you winning this state? Where does it stand now, sir?
We definitely are. We definitely believe we're going to win this evening. We've run a very good campaign and a very good field operation. This campaign has been more about sort of a ground war than an air war at this point, and we have the soldiers.
But what about the turnout in suburbs and in rural areas? It was hurting you very badly considering the numbers you were bringing out of Philadelphia tonight.
Well, I'm not so sure that it hurts us so much as, I mean, the turnout has been very high throughout the state. It has been higher in some areas than I would have necessarily wanted, but we have been doing very, very well in both the suburbs and in the city.
That's Dan Fee, the communications director for Gore 2000 in Pennsylvania. We'll have more from him later. That's the latest from here, Jim.
Thank you, Vernon, and we will have more of Action News Election 2000 coverage in just a moment.
That's the ABC affiliate in Philadelphia. Let's return to Steve Scully of C-SPAN on the Internet.
Susan, two results also from WPVI, the ABC affiliate in Philadelphia. In the U.S. Senate race, again, Tom Carper, who has been projected the winner over Bill Roth, who is seeking a 7th term. And for those who have been following the governor's race in Delaware, Ruth Ann Minner projected the winner. She is the lieutenant governor from Milford, Delaware, defeating John Burrs, who was the Republican nominee in that state.
Thanks very much. We're taking your telephone calls throughout the evening to hear what you think of what's been happening at the polls. Tell us if you've got some results from your state that have been called by the television stations that you're watching so we can learn along the way. Next up is Washington, D.C., Democrats line.
Hi. Yes. Hi. Yes. I voted for Gore in this election because I think that with the upcoming Supreme Court nominations that the women's right to choose is at danger if Bush wins. And I think that that's a very important issue in our election today.
Thanks for your call. Next is a telephone call from Highland, Indiana.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Needles, and I just turned 18 this year.
First election. What was it like to vote?
It was great. I'm glad to see that Indiana went to Republican and that George Bush won our state. I think that he should be everybody's choice for president. He has good ideas on tax cuts and everything. And Al Gore, I mean, look at the Democratic Party for the last 8 years. Who would want a president, you know, that followed after Bill Clinton?
And when did you decide you were going to be a Republican?
I've always been Republican. My family's always been Republican for many, many years. And I just like what Republicans stand for.
Okay, thank you for calling. Next is Holiday, Tennessee, a Democrat on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm vote for Al Gore. If we vote for George Bush, I feel that we'll go into like another depression like we had a few years ago. And if we vote for Bush, I believe that the elderly people will not be able to survive on the Social Security or income, or disability income that they receive.
Thank you. Chicago, your next Republican voter. Go ahead.
How you doing today, ma'am?
Thanks. What's on your mind about today's election so far?
Okay, I think, from what I see, I think Bush should not be winning because, first of all, to be the president of the United States of America, I think you have a tremendous responsibility to know a lot of things, and I don't think George Bush has enough knowledge to be able to do that. And he talks a lot about education and everything. I think, first of all, he needs to know a lot of things. Once you become a president of the United States, the most powerful country in the world, you have to know a lot of things. You have to know about the world. You're going to be the president of the world. Not only the president of the United States, but the president of the world. I think he needs to have tremendous knowledge about the world and about what's going on in the country before he can become president. I think he may be a good candidate for 2008 or something, but I don't think he should be a president for now.
Thank you very much. According to Voter.com, the Electoral College tally right now stands at Bush 141, Gore 146. Next, Iron Mountain, Michigan. You are on the air, and we have heard that Michigan has gone to Al Gore. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm disappointed because I'm a registered Democrat, and I voted for George Bush. I also voted for John McCain, and why I voted for George Bush is I don't like politicians who lie, that outright lie. I voted for Clinton twice, very disappointed, and I hope Bush wins. That's it.
Well, can you tell us what you think might have turned the tide in your state?
Pardon me?
What made the difference in Michigan for Al Gore?
Oh, I live in the Upper Peninsula, and I know that it's heavily Bush country here with the gun rights and everything. So probably what turned the tide would be lower Michigan, like Detroit and that.
Thanks for participating. Phoenix is next, a Republican. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona.
Can you please turn down the volume on your TV? We're getting some feedback.
Sure. I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm just hoping that I voted for George W. Bush, and I'm hoping that there's not going to be a repeat of the '96 election.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm hoping that the split between the Republicans and the Democratic Party is no longer there, that I believe, that we need a change in the White House.
How busy were the polls in Phoenix?
Busy.
More so than you've seen in past presidential elections?
Oh, yes.
And what do you think's happening?
Hard to say. I believe that, with Phoenix being a George W. Bush state, I would like to believe that there is that the majority of the people are voting for Bush, and I still subscribe to the Electoral College, and also too I look at both sides for the popular turnout.
Okay, thank you for your call. Bethesda, Maryland is next, a Democrat. Welcome to the program.
Hello?
You're on the air.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to note that I don't think that Vice President Gore should be compared to President Clinton. Second of all, I think that I'm very content that Vice President Gore has won in Florida. But also I find it interesting that of the states of Florida, Virginia, and Texas, that they have the highest death penalty rate, and also basically that it has to do with blacks. And I think that's something that was never heard in the campaign speeches, and that's something that really should be considered.
Now, you've got a congressional race in Bethesda, Connie Morella, Terry Learman, a lot of money spent there. Have you heard any results?
Pardon?
Have you heard any results on the Connie Morella congressional race?
No, I sure wish I did, because I'm for Learman all the way.
Okay, thanks for your call. Next, we'll show you reporting from WPLG TV in Miami from tonight's results at the polls. Let's listen in.
Live from Channel 10 Eyewitness News, this is the 2000 vote.
Good evening, I'm Christy Kruger.
And I'm Dwight Lauderdale. We're getting more election results.
Let's check right in with Michael Putney in election control. Michael.
Christy, the banner headline in this election in Florida, the Sunshine State, is Gore country. We are projecting that Al Gore will win Florida's 25 electoral votes. This is a stunning victory for Gore and the Democratic Party, a bitter defeat for George W. Bush and his brother Jeb, a popular governor whose popularity was supposed to translate into an easy victory here for the Texas governor. That will not happen. Jeb Bush told me on Sunday that he was confident that his brother would win Florida. All I can say is I wouldn't want to be Jeb when they carve the turkey at Kennebunkport later this month. But in all fairness, we should also note that this election was not a referendum on Jeb Bush. Nevertheless, a Gore victory in Florida is big news, and we finally see some election results. If we can put these up on the screen, I imagine that they're going to show that Gore won mostly on the strength of a huge cushion from Broward County. We don't have those results yet, but we believe that, in fact, there will be a solid Gore victory in Broward, and we have just learned that in Miami-Dade County, well, here are some of those figures that we wanted to look at. This is statewide results, Gore leading 51-49. We believe that will be the eventual outcome. Only 5% of the precincts reporting, but we believe the handwriting is on the wall. As I was going to say, in Miami-Dade County, the victory for Gore is substantial, 60-40. Gore beats George W. Bush in Miami-Dade County. Christy and Dwight.
All right, thanks, Michael. And with word in now that Gore is projected to win Florida, Gore supporters are beginning to celebrate.
Doug Dunbar is live on Miami Beach, where that party is already underway, Doug?
That's right. When it was announced that Gore would carry the state of Florida, a loud cheer. You'd think the Dolphins had won the Super Bowl, and that came from a relatively small crowd so far. Only about 75 supporters here right now. They're expecting 1,000. A lot of optimism as we stand right now, but that wasn't the case earlier.
Okay, I was going to be mad that I thought Bush was going to win. I was trying to reconcile myself to the fact that Bush may win. But
and then between 7:30 and 8, you see Florida, you see Michigan, the cavalcade in Gore's favor.
Yeah. And then if Pennsylvania comes in, and then California has to hold it, then
there's going to be a party here tonight.
But not.
By the way, they only have this room booked until 1 o'clock in the morning. It is very likely that the Democratic leaders who are organizing this party at the Fontainebleau are already trying to ink a new contract to go well into Wednesday morning. We're live at the Fontainebleau. I'm Doug Dunbar, Channel 10 Eyewitness News.
Thanks, Doug. We have another projected winner to tell you about tonight.
ABC News is declaring Bill Nelson the winner in the Senate race in Florida.
Nelson, a Democrat, concentrated his campaign on South Florida.
Kelly Mitchell was live with the Nelson campaign. She's in Tallahassee. Kelly?
The workers had grown their nails extra long, but it looks like there will be no nail biting tonight. Bill Nelson, the projected winner for Connie Mack's old U.S. Senate seat. We understand that the candidate is on his way to his own party, but what he wants to do is to wait until Representative Bill McCollum actually concedes defeat before he would want to give his victory speech. But it looks to be a very early night, at least in Tallahassee. Live in Tallahassee, I'm Kelly Mitchell, Channel 10 Eyewitness News.
And as you can see now, the numbers are slowly coming into election control.
So let's go right back to Michael for some more results. Michael?
Dwight, we do have some results in 3 important races. First, Congressman Alcee Hastings has been re-elected easily with 72% of the vote. In the race for state insurance commissioner, in that race, Tom Gallagher is leading. If we can put that board up, well, we cannot, but there it is. Tom Gallagher leading John Cosgrove of Miami-Dade rather handily in that race. Finally, in the race for state education commissioner, Charlie Crist of St. Petersburg is beating George Sheldon. He is leading only 2% in. These races are very early. We'll have many more results as the night goes on. Dwight and Christy.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
And our thanks to WPLG TV in Miami, the ABC affiliate there, and all 10 of the stations across the country which are allowing us to show you their election returns tonight. Martinsville, Virginia, you are on C-SPAN, Republican line. Go ahead. Good evening, caller.
Yeah. I've just got a couple points to make real quick. The first one being, it's pretty disheartening and kind of frightening that the American voters are calling in asking questions of you. It's kind of late in the ball game to be, wondering where the candidates stand on certain issues. And secondly, the lady that called in concerned about Bush's past and the alcoholism. Everybody has a past, and that's the good thing about a past. That's where it is in the past. I don't think that jeopardizes or affects his ability to lead the country.
And can you tell us your reaction to the Senate turnover in Virginia?
Well, it was kind of surprising, to be honest with you.
Can you explain why you thought it was surprising?
Well, people around here are big Allen fans, and but I figured Rob would get it, but I guess the incumbent won there, so that's about all you can say about it.
Okay, thanks for the call. Next, we're going to return to Congressional Quarterly. A little bit earlier, we heard about an overview of the Senate. Greg Giroux is there, who can tell us about what to look for in House races. Well, we know that 435 are at stake, but how many of them are really competitive?
Oh, maybe 30 or 40 tonight, Susan. So far, we have some results in Kentucky, which is one of the 2 states that close early, and we have a very close race for a very important open seat in Florida. But there really is a small universe of races here to look at.
And which ones really are key to control of the House by the Democrats or Republicans?
Well, most of them are open seats. Those are seats that incumbents are not defending because of retirements or seeking another office, or in a couple of cases, losses in primary elections. A big one, some on the East Coast where the polls closed early. You have Florida's 8th District where Bill McCollum is leaving open his seat. There's a very, very tight race there between Rick Keller and Linda Chapin. As I said, the polls closed there at 7. The polls have also closed in Kentucky and Indiana, and there are a couple of races in each state there that both parties are looking at.
Do the numbers overall, how many seats does one party or the other have to take in order to gain control?
Well, currently the Democrats technically need 7 seats. One of those, actually, Democrats practically need 6 because there's a seat in California that Matthew Martinez's seat that he switched to the Republican Party in July after losing the Democratic primary. So the Democrats really need 6 seats. Currently it's 222 Republicans, 209 Democrats with 2 independents and 2 vacancies, but functionally Republicans have a 224 to 211 advantage, which means the Democrats need 7 to get to 218.
And how challenging is that for them as they went into today?
It's certainly more of a mountain than a molehill, especially when you have a very small universe of competitive seats. Democrats winning 7. They really need a lot of breaks to go their way if they're going to organize as the majority party. So it is a very, very difficult task for the Democrats.
And we've been hearing all along that we really may not know about the ultimate outcome of the House because a number of those tightly contested races are in the West.
That's right. You have about at least 4, perhaps 5 or 6 close races in California alone, 1 in Washington State. And certainly if the results from the Eastern time zone and Central time zone states maybe favor the Democrats by a seat or 2, meaning that they would, and if they went into the California and Washington races needing about 4 or 5, then we could be up very, very late. But if the Republicans get a couple of Democratic open seats in the East and don't lose any, or if they only lose a couple of their incumbents, that should be enough to cushion their losses, any expected losses they might have in the West.
So within about the next hour or so, given poll closing times, you should have somewhat of a handle on how this is going.
I think that's true. You have a lot of states where the polls close at 8 p.m. and we should be getting some, we're getting some early numbers, although not any conclusive numbers from those states. But a lot of states did close at 8 p.m. and there's some very, very big races in those states. And so in the next hour to hour and a half, I think we should have a more, certainly a less fuzzy picture than we have now.
Well, thanks for the overview, Greg Giroux at Congressional Quarterly, and we'll be back with more specifics as those numbers start rolling in.
Thank you.
Steve Scully, our colleague at C-SPAN on the Internet and computer.
Susan, there have been a lot of calls on the projections based on exit poll results. What we have at our website at cspan.org are the actual numbers from the Associated Press. If you go to the website at cspan.org, what you'll be able to see if you click on Campaign 2000, again, we've been talking about the 54-46 makeup of the current Congress, 54 Republicans, 46 Democratic seats. If you go to individual states, for example, we'll go down to Georgia, Zell Miller winning with 54% of the vote compared to 42% for Mac Mattingly. Moving down to Florida, this is a Democratic pickup. Bill Nelson, who will take over the seat currently held by Senator Connie Mack, defeating Bill McCollum, a congressman and one of those House managers. There has been some interest in Massachusetts. Jackie Robinson, who is challenging Senator Edward Kennedy, he got 12% of the vote compared to 75% for Senator Kennedy. And we talked earlier about Connecticut. This is the seat that Senator Joseph Lieberman was running simultaneously while running with Al Gore as vice presidential nominee. Phil Giordano getting 32% of the vote compared to 68% to Senator Joseph Lieberman. So we'll take a look now at some of the new Senate members for the 107th Congress. They include Bill Nelson of Florida, a Democrat, George Allen, former governor from Virginia, defeating Chuck Robb, Tom Carper, the governor of Delaware, who defeated Bill Roth, who was seeking a 7th term, and John Corzine, who spent well over $50 million defeating Bob Franks, the Republican candidate in New Jersey.
And all 4 of those are turnovers, right?
Florida's a turnover. Virginia's a turnover. New Jersey is a Democratic seat, maintains Democratic control, and Tom Carper's seat is a turnover from what was a Republican seat.
So 3 out of 4. Thanks very much for that. We'll be back in a bit for some more. Next telephone calls we listen to your comments on today is from Eatonville, Washington, a Democrat. Go ahead.
Yes, and this is Christy Arnested calling from Eatonville. I would like to challenge the people who have not voted yet and challenge the Republican Party to look at our great country as it is right now. We are not in a deficit. We have abundance to reinvest in this great country and also give other worlds a chance to have a hand up. So I'm voting Gore. Thank you very much.
Before you go, you also have a big Senate race going on in Washington.
Yes, we do. And of course, I think Maria Cantwell did very well, and I'm really rooting for her.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about whether or not this was a race where national issues or state issues predominated?
I think both issues predominated in this race.
And polls don't close for a little while out there, so
That's
we don't have
right.
any sense of how that's going.
I'm not sure. I know that in this community that I'm in a minority, but the state at large, I'm not sure how that's going. I would just, as I said, I'm just calling so that I can challenge people that haven't voted yet to get up and do it. And if we want our country to remain great and strong, we need to hear from them.
Thanks for your call. Miami is next. Caller's a Republican. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. How you doing?
Thanks
My
for your call.
name's Javier Fuentes. Basically, I've been a little bit saddened due to the winning here in Florida by Al Gore. I do feel that George Bush would be a great president for this beautiful nation, the nation which is made of immigrants. He has shown a lot of opportunity, showing his honesty, his integrity. Basically, Jeb Bush's brothers showed a lot to the Cuban community, being myself Cuban, towards a little 6-year-old boy by the name of Elian Gonzalez. They've also showed the Republican Party a lot of affection towards the Cubans when they knocked down the planes from Brothers to the Rescue and other issues that basically the Cuban community here in Miami-Dade County, plus being an educator, which Al Gore, is pretty much within the unions of the UTD, United Teachers of Dade. I've given my opinion, being an educator myself, and showing that, yes, Al Gore may be giving some sort of issues that are beautiful, like the cup of gold, but I'm willing to refuse the cup of gold and go with the morals and the respects and the constellation and basically the affection that the Republican Party has given us.
Thank you for your call. Sandpoint, Idaho, a Democrat. Good evening to you.
Hi. Hello.
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes. Well, I sit here in Idaho, and we talk a lot about voter turnout. And voter turnout in Idaho can be done on the spur of the moment. We can walk to the polls without pre-registering to vote. And I was wondering how many other states allow people to just walk up, show their ID, and vote, and how that would affect the kind of apathy that people do have about having to register and getting in ahead of time. There are people in neighboring states like Washington that if you haven't pre-registered, when Election Day comes, you're just out of luck. And I'm kind of curious as to if all of the states had what Idaho has, which is the ability to just walk up and vote, how many more people in the country would actually vote?
You know, I can't answer that specific question, but there are a number of states who are experimenting with different things such as voting by mail and the like. So it'll be interesting after this day is over to compare turnout in the states which have been more experimental with those which have done the more traditional method. Thanks very much. Appreciate your call. Next is Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Republican line.
Hi, I'm Steve from Pottstown, Pennsylvania. I've been watching the various news channels about the electoral votes.
And what can you tell us?
Well, I've noticed that they have Gore as having 25 electoral votes for Florida, and they've given that to Gore. But I've also noticed at the bottom of the screens they showed Gore as being 49% in that state and Bush as 49% in that state. How is it that they can project that state being for Gore and others too close to call? I think they really should explain what their criteria is for these states that are too close to call and why they're handing this state of Florida to Gore when it looks like, by their own statistics, that they're tied.
Thanks very much. Next, we return to news coverage. This is WDIV for their report on the election.
This is a Local 4 instant election update.
Good evening and welcome back to this Local First Edition election update. We are watching a controversy that has been stirring here in Detroit because of problems at the polls. A federal judge has been asked to extend the voting hours in the city of Detroit. Let's go to Karen Drew now to see where that controversy stands right now. Karen?
Carmen, we thought we'd get an answer by 8 o'clock since the polls were supposed to close by 8 o'clock, but the judge is still listening to both sides. Just a few moments ago, he was on the phone to Lansing listening to the Republican Party as Republicans vehemently told him They do not want the polls to stay open to 11 o'clock. Then on the other side, he was listening to the Democrats saying, for example, in Canton, there is a 3-hour wait, and many people have been, in a sense, turned away from the polls because of the long lines. Democrats are contending that the polls were not adequately staffed, adequately supplied, and the polling places were not prepared for such a high voter turnout. Now, again, right now, Judge Friedman is trying to make that decision. As soon as we know, we will let you know. That's the latest outside of the federal courthouse. Karen Drew, Local First.
Boy, Karen, a lot of complications to figure out, not the least of which is the fact that exit polling informations have called the races you've seen on NBC tonight and here at Local 4 for both first. Let's take a look at the numbers for president for Al Gore. Michigan goes to Al Gore by 5%, 50% to 45%. That's our projection on what will happen. Meanwhile, over in the Senate race.
Let's take a look at that Senate race. You know, it was I want to call it a dogfight because it was neck and neck, and it switched from week to week. But right now, according to our exit poll numbers, Debbie Stabenow up by 49% to Spencer Abraham's 47%. And Paula Tutman is standing by at the Stabenow headquarters. Paula, what is the mood there?
Oh, you know, I got to tell you guys, in about 0 to 5 seconds flat, it really started turning into a party. Just about the time when it was projected that Michigan actually went into Gore's electoral votes category. Now, we talked to Debbie Stabenow. She says she is biting her nails. So people say, even with the exit polls, it's a little early to tell, but she is still very, very encouraged.
We're just thinking about what this would mean if I had the opportunity to do this. Not only would I have the opportunity to go and really fight for the families of Michigan, but I'd be the first woman from Michigan to be in the Senate.
I understand we do have a decision on those polls. Let's take it right back to you right now.
In fact, take it right back to Karen Drew for more on what the judges decided. Karen?
The judge has just decided the polls will not stay open. They are going to close. He says simply because lines are long, that's simply an inconvenience. It's not a violation of the constitutional right. So again, polls will not extend their hours to 11 o'clock. They will close at 8. But of course, if someone is in line waiting, they can cast their ballot. That is the latest outside of here of the federal courthouse. Karen Drew, Local First.
All right, I guess you have to expect certain things on election nights like this.
Many will argue tomorrow that it was not a matter of the lines only being too long, but that some names weren't there on the registry.
Well, we heard from the Stabenow camp. Let's go over to Roger Weber, who is with the Spencer Abraham campaign headquarters. Roger?
Yes, Carmen. Paula talked about the jubilant mood at Stabenow headquarters here, where the Republicans are supposed to be partying. There is very little to cheer about. They're watching on the monitors as Florida and Michigan have been projected for Al Gore and Michigan projected for Debbie Stabenow. Now, some of the Abraham supporters point out that other news organizations still consider the Senate race too close to call. They want to see some raw numbers, and they want to hear from the candidate, Spencer Abraham himself. But right now, he appears to be in danger of losing his bid for a second term. Reporting live in Lansing, Roger Weber, back to you.
All right, thank you, Roger.
And from Michigan, we take you next to WWBT, which is covering the race from Richmond, Virginia.
Big statewide contest, the race for U.S. Senate. NBC 12 and the networks have already projected George Allen the victor in that contest, 53 to 47% victory over incumbent Democrat Charles Robb.
And that with half the vote counted, but the projections have been consistent. Let's look at the congressional races. Of course, we have 3 races in the state that are uncontested. Let's look at the ones in our area that are contested. Eric Cantor clearly has won in the 7th Congressional District over Warren Stewart. Let's go now to the 5th.
In the 5th District, the independent candidate Virgil Goode with 64% of the vote over Democratic contender John Boyd, president of the National Black Farmers Association. Goode, former Democrat who turned independent last year. He organizes with the Republicans, though, in the House of Representatives.
Let's go to the 1st District now. This is Fredericksburg and down toward the peninsula. Lawrence Davies, the Fredericksburg mayor, apparently has lost significantly to Joanne Davis, the Republican. Of course, this is the race Joanne Davis won over Paul Jost.
Yes, she won that very hotly contested
and
primary
Governor Gilmore
race.
had come out in favor of Jost, and Joanne Davis won it, and now she is going to Congress.
All right. We do have our reporter who is with the Joanne Davis camp, Mike Kolstad. How happy are they tonight, Mike?
It is quite a happy crowd down here in York County. Good evening from York County. A very crowded Andrea's restaurant where Joanne Davis declared victory in this race just a little while ago. She has been kind enough to join us for a few minutes. Congratulations, I guess, are in order.
Thank you very much.
All right, now you're heading to Washington. What do you plan to do now that it appears that you have this seat?
I guess I'll find a place to live.
Any issues you intend to take on once you get to Congress?
Yeah, there are some issues that I've campaigned on, like keeping our promise to our military retirees, being a vote to make sure that we lock up Social Security, that it can't be used for anything other than what it was intended. On education, making sure that we allow the flexibility of the money to come back to the states to empower the parents and the teachers to do what they feel is necessary to teach our kids.
In your opinion, what was the difference in this race?
Grassroots.
What as you had said, the human resource was what it was.
That's exactly right. It is the human resource, and that's what it's all about. And sometimes we lose that in politics, but in the 1st District, the people are just so fantastic. And when you get out and you get to meet them and you talk to them, they're there for you.
All righty. Congratulations again, Joanne Davis. That is the declared winner here in this 1st District. And with that, we'll send it back to you in Richmond from a very happy York County.
All right. Joanne Davis becomes the first Republican female member of Virginia's congressional delegation. A big victory for her.
Takes the seat that Herb Bateman held for so many years down there, and he, of course, the late Herb Bateman now. Let's look at the Henrico bond referenda. I think we had 5 issues here. Let's start with the school bonds. An overwhelming yes, 98% of the vote. So the school bond issue passes.
On the issue of libraries, 2 new libraries, $28 million for those libraries. Voters would like to have them.
Let's go on to the 3rd issue now, the fire stations. Once again, that passed by a significant margin. Looks like, Sabrina, people are just going down the list, and they're either against or for the bond issues.
Parks passes $16 million for our park purchases in Henrico.
And some of the supervisors in recent weeks had the second.
And we'll leave this station as they move to these local issues now. Again, WWBT in Richmond, an NBC affiliate, and we'll be checking back with them throughout the evening. And there have been a few more states added to the Electoral College tally as we've been in our live telecast. Pennsylvania has been thrown to the Gore camp, and that brings the current tally at Bush 130 and Gore 146, with 270, that number that they're looking for. Returning to telephone calls, next is Wilmington, North Carolina, Republican line.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, how come the Republicans, even though I'm a Republican, I used to be a Democrat, it's kind of echoing real bad, is it?
That's your TV that's up too loud.
Is my TV up too loud?
Okay, you want to try again?
Yes, ma'am. I think the education level in this country's gone down, because if you do your research, I'm a former Democrat and now I'm a Republican. And what I looked at is I went and did the research that all these Democrats have taken credit for, just like they took credit. I heard Clinton say he was for the balanced budget, and Republicans couldn't take credit for that. But the Republicans are the one that put the balanced budget on the agenda. And then they had to shut down the federal government for him to get a balanced budget started. And my question is to you, are you a Republican or a Democrat?
Thanks very much. Not going to answer that question because it doesn't matter to our coverage here. Next is Columbia, South Carolina, calling on our Democrats line. You're on the air. Welcome. Columbia, go ahead. All right, let's move on. Where are you calling from, please?
Delaware.
Well, which town in Delaware?
Dover, Delaware.
You are on the air. What do you have to say?
My name is Robbie Pace, and I'm a Democrat. And I'd like to say that I'm very proud to see Tom Carper, Democrat, move to the Senate. And I'm hopeful that Gore, Vice President Gore, will succeed also.
Now, why do you think Mr. Carper was successful?
I believe he brought to the table a lot of the issues that Senator Roth didn't want to discuss.
Such as?
Such as issues concerning minorities. And I could get deeper with it, but we don't have enough time.
Thanks for your call. Wilmington, Indiana is next. Republican, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Gina Johnson, and I'm calling from Bloomington, Indiana. And I was interested in the Republican Party and Medicare. I know that both parties have voiced some concerns and trying to do their best with Medicare, and I know that Al Gore has conveyed that he wants to add the prescription plan to Medicare, but I haven't really heard where they're going to cut costs in other corners to take care of the prescription cost. And I know that there's been a lot of cuts in the last couple of years, and I feel like there's going to be a lot more cuts that come around. And I'm a nurse, and I've worked in the healthcare field since back in 1982, and I've seen a lot of changes. But I feel like they need to really look at the whole picture and not try to make promises and cut from somewhere else.
Thank you, caller. Next, Providence, Rhode Island, Democrats line. Your comment on election night.
Hi, Susan. I just want to thank you guys for being totally fair. I hear people calling up and browbeating you, and it's terrible. In any case, I'm a Democrat, but...
Well, thanks for the compliments. We don't feel browbeaten. It's all about politics tonight, and you know how that goes. But tell me about what you think about what's happening so far.
Once Florida went, Gore clearly got it.
So as far as you're concerned, the presidential race is over?
Yes.
Just waiting for it to make it official.
But the Senate here in Rhode Island, oddly enough, is a Democratic state. Chafee will win.
And why is that?
His father was a wonderful man, and Reagan is anti-choice, which is odd for New England. Excuse me, I'm getting nervous.
So a little bit sentiment and a little bit on the issues, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your call. Appreciate it. Next is Shalimar, Florida, calling on our independent line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I was calling about two things. The big networks had announced that the polls in Florida have been closed. Florida, we have 2 time zones here, both Eastern and Central. So when they announce everything's closed, that kind of throws people off quite a bit. And the second thing I was calling about, our local TV station here in Pensacola announced that Governor Bush had a higher number of the popular vote in Florida. I guess with the electoral votes, it's possible he could have the electoral votes but not the popular vote. I just wonder if someone could check into that, or how that works.
Okay, thank you very much. Next is Mount Dora, Florida, Republican line.
Yes, my name is Joe Creeman from Mount Dora, Florida. I am a registered Republican. The only thing that I have to say about the entire country in the state of Florida, I'm born and raised in the state of Florida. I can't understand why in the world anyone in this country would like big government. Went to public schools, got educated in a public university. Big government.
Caller, excuse me for interrupting you, but Senator Chuck Robb, who just lost his seat, is coming to the microphone.